We are back for season 15 of the Dateable
Woo!
podcast. This seemed like a really long hiatus for some reason, but it wasn't.
No, it
I
was
don't know why.
actually shorter than normal because we ended up throwing the bonus one with Roe v.
Yeah.
Wade. So it's actually shorter than intended, but I agree. We've just been gone for too long and we're about to change that.
Well, I think the reason why it feels like it's been a longer hiatus is because Julie and I have been working on something kind of secretive. We've alluded to this before. Let's just say we're bringing you more content in a different way, but the same sort of insights and the same tone as we've always brought it to you on Dateable. So it's been keeping us busy. So it just feels like we've been gone longer because we've been working on this other thing, which you'll all find out soon, and we won't be as cryptic going forward.
Yeah, I feel like we have a few other things going on, but this is probably the
Yes,
one that
yes.
will be announced the most recent. But also, we've been hard at work recording season 15. So I feel like some of that too, I'm like, I want to put out into the world these conversations that we've had. And I keep feeling like we can reference them because they're already out, but then realizing that we're just ahead of the ball this season.
If you think about it, it's every new conversation we have, we take away a few new nuggets. But because we haven't broadcast these episodes, it's almost like a secret and you can't talk about it openly yet. That's how I feel. But I'm glad this episode we're premiering with this one because there was just so much to be said after this interview with Rob Mack.
Yes, and you all probably remember we had Rob Mack. Was it 2 seasons back at this point?
Yeah.
I believe it wasn't last season, but the season before. So season 13. And he is a happiness expert.
Yeah.
But of course, when you ask people, are you happy? Aren't you happy? Dating, relationships, love inevitably comes into the picture. So thereby, by default, he is now a relationship expert as well, or a love expert. I don't know if that was his intention starting out, but it has come together for him. But we love Rob. He wrote a new book, Love from the Inside Out. And immediately when we saw this, we both said to each other, we need to get Rob back. And he needs to be the season
definitely
opener.
do. And just as a refresher for anybody who can't remember who he is, or maybe you haven't listened to the previous episode, he's someone who was so down on himself at one point in his life where he became suicidal. And he said, I need to get myself out of this. And this search for happiness became his mission. But in that search for happiness, he realized happiness is a default for all of us. It's not something we get just because we get that job we want or the relationship we want. We can tap into it anytime we want. And that's been the most powerful insight from our previous conversation is happiness is our default.
Yeah, and we are shedding light into how love is also our default in this conversation. And I must say, I kind of had this newfound appreciation for our podcast. I know this sounds weird, but as I was editing, said from the person that makes the podcast, I don't know if I'm losing credibility there, but I feel like something about this episode and where I am in my current life hit home. And as I was editing this episode, I cried. I admit that I cried.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be that big of a shock because Yue and others know that I cry easily, even when I'm happy. So, I mean, it's an achievement from the content, but it also, this is kind of my state in general. But part of it was my partner and I, things are going great, but we are kind of struggling with some timelines that we both have the same vision for our future. We just are, bringing different life experiences into the picture, different ways of thinking. And it's something we're navigating through. It's not a bad thing. I think that's just a part of the course with a relationship, that you're not going to always be 100% aligned on every last thing. Two people with two different thought patterns. And I had this conversation in therapy, and my therapist was saying, maybe you should spend more time alone. And I thought to myself, why would I do that? The whole goal is to bridge us together. And it didn't hit until I listened to Rob's episode with Love from the Inside Out of how he just how the love within you is so core to everything and to how you love other humans, and having that found appreciation isn't something that, changes based on who you're with, but it's always there. And fostering that self-love is just as essential. And I'm not saying like I don't have self-love now, but I do think like when you're in a relationship, it is easy to just do things all together all the time and lose a little bit of yourself. And regaining that sense of self, I do think is so important. So it was kind of this perfect storm of, therapy setting in, Rob's comments, and I just hit for me. And I bet a lot of a lot of people have written into us saying, okay, I needed that DTR brunch talk right at this moment, or I needed this how to get over rejection. And I think that is something that's so wonderful about this podcast is we are able to meet people where they are with the back catalog of many, many topics we've covered.
Maybe we are syncing like menstrual cycles, because I feel like I'm going through something very similar. And I've been spending a lot more time alone, kind of soul searching, because I realize, one part of me is like, I can't count on my partner to be everything for me, right? We've talked about this so much, but it's harder to put into practice when you spend time together. You kind of expect your partner to create this partnership that is like totally idealized in your head. But then I was listening to this. Okay, you're gonna think it's funny. I joined this hypnotherapy app.
Okay,
this guy gets on and he kind of hypnotizes you over the app. It's not really hypnotherapy; it's really like meditation. But he said, every day we have these magic moments that we can look for. But because we're just racing through life, we don't stop to think about what those magic moments are. And it dawned on me that my magic moments, I've been kind of relying on my partner to create these with me when I could create these magic moments myself. And in this meditation / hypnotherapy, he said, recall back to a time you experienced a magic moment by yourself. What is something that you ventured into, something new, an exciting place or an accomplishment? And I thought about the time I traveled through Italy by myself, and I just sat at the top of this mountain in Cinque Terre and looking down and thinking, this is a magic moment, and I can still create that for myself. So I'm so with you on this, Julie. It's not about pushing partners away. It's actually making yourself more of the pillar in your life so that you can be a stronger person, a stronger partner for the people in your life.
Yes, and my therapist actually suggested solo travel, which is funny. But I think, honestly, listening to this episode, and Rob has such an emphasis that love comes from within. And, obviously, human connection, the people in your life is important, but ultimately you hold that power. And it actually made me appreciate what I have with my partner more. And I'm definitely someone, I feel like I've been guilty of being like, okay, I'm getting older. We don't have as much time, and maybe like abiding by timelines a little more. And it definitely changed my perspective of like, I need to just appreciate what I have present and the love that I have with my partner. And it doesn't mean that you can't want these things and build a life towards these things. But this episode that we did with Rob definitely helped shed light on, we talk about it in here and a lot more, so I won't go too much on that. The relationship is the container and love is a part of that container.
He does also emphasize presence. And I think that's a problem with dating. I think that's a problem with dating and also just everyday life for me, is that I'm constantly 5 steps ahead of myself.
Yes.
That I put so much pressure and anxiety on myself for something that hasn't even fucking happened yet, when I can't just, sit still and shut off my brain for a minute. Because when you shut off your brain, that's when you realize all the good things that are happening around you, and you can be more grateful for the moment that you're in, instead of thinking of all the things that you don't have in a future that you have no control over.
Yeah, last season, I feel like our theme was being intentional of your love life and
Yeah.
how do you start to figure out what you want and how you get what you want. Maybe this season, it's appreciating what you have a bit more because
Mm.
I think, we are all guilty of that. The 5 steps ahead is dangerous. And I think women, especially, not to generalize because it's everyone, but women were almost like programmed to think 5 steps ahead. And it's good in some ways because it makes things happen, but it's also does detract from current day.
Okay, can we just actually talk about this? I know we don't like to talk in generalizations, but I find more and more proof of this is
Oh, yes.
okay, my parents were packing for a 2-week trip to Alaska, okay? And so I came over to help them, and my mom had already packed for the entire trip, including the 2 days they come back, like what are they going to eat after they come back. My dad was still thinking about what he was going to wear on the plane. Like the guy has not even gotten past day 0. And that was just, to me, just watching this, I just had this moment of thinking, this is exactly the difference between men and women biologically and mentally, is that women are always thinking 1,000 steps ahead. You've basically you've gone on a trip, but you've already planned your entire trip. You've already been there. You already traveled it. And men are much better at being in the moment, but also men are a little bit behind. It was like my dad was like a step behind. So then how do you get two people to not be so frustrated with each other? Because my parents were definitely very frustrated with each other. They were just not aligned on where they were in their packing.
I hate gender stereotyping too, but this is true. I'm sorry. There's all evidence. I've talked to so many girlfriends about just, how did things progress with your relationship? And they all basically were like, I needed to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like men are change resistant overall, and it definitely causes disconnect because also you don't want to feel pressured and you don't want to pressure your partner, but it's hard when you're steps ahead not to feel that if you're steps behind. So how do we bridge that gap? Because I think this shows up all the way from the first date, where I think men in general, I've read a lot of studies about this, that they're assessing the date more of just, how do I feel in this moment? Am I having a fun time? Where women are like, is this going to be my future husband? Do they have earning potential? What are our babies going to look like? It's a whole deal. And it really is jarring because that does cause people to feel like they're not on the same page. And that is challenging whether you're the one ahead or the one behind.
I like to really explore this, Julie. Maybe we can find an expert who can either prove us right or prove us wrong, because I like to know if there are biological implications to all of this. I even think about how women just have so much on our minds all the time, just because, okay, this is going to sound very superficial, but from clothes to accessories to makeup, all the things we have to think about because we have access to them, and our roles are keep changing. So the roles that we're trying to portray, or the perception of the roles that we are assuming. But for men, I feel like there isn't as much of that stuff, the distractions or the things to balance going on. And I could totally be wrong, but I would like for an expert to come in and say, biologically, women were born to balance and juggle so many more things.
Yeah. Well, there are stats and experts that have said that women are better multitaskers. I think that is an actual, the way brains are developed is different in that regard. I do agree we should get someone to go in a lot more depth, but it is a very fascinating thing that keeps coming out. But yes.
We need it. We need it so bad. I don't know if you've encountered this too. I feel like I'm also the optimizer in my relationship. I have to optimize the weekend, pack it in, optimize our days, optimize our meals. And my boyfriend's simply like, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think that far ahead, and we don't need to pack it in.
Oh, yeah. I just did a trip to San Luis Obispo and Paso Robles. I've learned that's how you pronounce it. Not
Robles,
which is what I and everyone else calls it. Which is basically Central California. It's right between LA and San Francisco. And I went with a girlfriend of mine and her partner, then my partner. So it was a double date trip. And the two of us planned the entire thing. every
course.
aspect of it.
Of course you did. Because if you didn't, nothing would fucking happen.
Well, that's the problem, right? It's like you don't want to be the one pushing, but also you don't want nothing to happen because then you just get frustrated, and that's where it is. But anyways,
okay, we can go on and on about this.
I digress, but I think regardless of your stance, definitely write in and tell us if you've been in similar situations because we would love to digest and dissect this. We would love to dissect this topic much further.
Yes. Okay, but to other topics, I guess. We are very happy to be back for season 15, and we are also very happy we've survived all the way to season 15.
Whew.
I don't know how we've kept this up for almost 7 years. We say this all the time, but this is our longest relationship ever, and it's going and it's growing. So thank you to all of you who've stayed with us throughout the seasons, but also for any of our new listeners, we so welcome you into the Dateable family.
Yes, we made a really fun teaser video. So if you haven't seen it yet, follow us at Dateable Podcast on Instagram. It's also in Love in the Time of Corona Facebook group. I think it's pretty much everywhere, but go to your preferred platform pretty much. But I loved seeing some of the comments, especially on Instagram. I think that's where most of them were just of, oh my God, I'm so excited. I've been counting down the days. I love you guys. Like, you changed my world. Like, all this stuff. Sometimes, again, even though we've been doing this for 7 years, it almost feels like it's just UA and I talking, or it's UA and I talking to a guest. And it's really, really helpful to keep us motivated to hear those types of comments that we are impacting your life. And I love getting those emails of, I needed this right now because I definitely related with this episode, and hopefully others will relate with this episode and all the episodes.
Yes.
Okay, so some announcements before we get into it. You've already heard, follow us at Dateable Podcast. Our TikTok is growing too. So if you are a TikTok user,
220 followers, guys.
I feel like we had like 25 before, so it's getting better. This is why we need to put the plug out.
My dog just looked up when I said 220.
He's like, oh, that's not
Is that
good.
a lot?
Mojo not approved.
I don't want to be associated.
Help us get to 1,000. That's the goal. But even more of a push, help us get to 1,000 reviews. We know there is way more than like 600 of you out there, which is currently our reviews. We get it. Writing a review sucks. Usually you only write it if something is really bad or someone instructed you to do it. But help us out. Let us keep giving this great content. That is the number one thing you could do today. Leave us a 5-star rating and review and share with a friend. Sharing is caring. Someone else will benefit from this episode. We know it.